Some memories never fade. They have fur, bright eyes, and the gift of loving us without saying a word. Because every dog carries a story, and maybe a part of yours. Get ready to discover more than a breed. Discover a lifelong companion.
In 1923, in the quiet streets of Silverton, Oregon, a small town nestled among pine-covered mountains, lived a family that had no idea they were about to become the protagonists of one of the most extraordinary stories of love and animal loyalty ever documented. The Brazier family, Frank, Elizabeth, and their 2 daughters, led a simple but happy life filled with the small pleasures that make a difference in daily life. Frank Brazier worked as the owner of a small restaurant in town, a man with calloused hands and a generous heart who knew every neighbor by name. Elizabeth took care of the house with the care and dedication of someone who transforms 4 walls into a true home. The 2 daughters, with their crystalline laughter, filled the house with joy and childish mischief. But there was a special member of this family, a dog who would become a legend. Bobbie was a mixed collie with a coat that seemed to have been hand-painted by nature, white as fresh snow from the Oregon mountains, with brown spots that recalled the golden autumn. His intelligent eyes shone with a wisdom that seemed ancient, and his ever-wagging tail betrayed his cheerful and affectionate nature. Bobbie wasn't just a pet, he was a family member in the truest sense of the word. He woke up with Frank every morning, following him to the kitchen where he received his morning affection. During the day, he was the silent guardian of the children, always alert, always protective. At night, he lay at the family's feet as if he were a sentinel watching over his beloved human's dreams. There was something special about Bobbie's personality that everyone in the neighborhood noticed. He possessed an almost human intelligence, able to understand not only commands, but also the mood and emotional needs of each family member. When Elizabeth was sad, Bobbie would simply appear at her side, placing his head on her lap in a gesture of silent comfort. When the children played in the yard, he participated in the games with the patience of a loving grandfather. Neighbors frequently commented on the extraordinary connection between Bobbie and the Braziers. It was as if there existed an invisible thread connecting the dog's heart to the heart of each family member. Bobbie knew everyone's schedules, knew when Frank would return from work, when the children would return from school. He was punctual as a Swiss watch, always in the right place at the right time. Frank used to say that Bobbie had an emotional map of the family engraved in his soul. The dog knew when someone needed company, when it was time to play, when it was time to be quiet. This perfect harmony created bonds that transcended the common relationship between humans and animals. The Brazier family's routine was simple but filled with love. Mornings began with Bobbie running around the yard, his paws creating small clouds of dust as he chased butterflies or simply celebrated the pleasure of being alive. During lunch, he sat patiently beside the table, never begging for food, but always receiving some special treat from Frank or Elizabeth. It was a common life, blessed by the extraordinary presence of a dog who seemed to understand the deepest meaning of unconditional love. No one could imagine that this bucolic peace was about to be tested in a way that would forever change not only the Brazier's life, but also the way the world would see animal loyalty. The summer of 1923 arrived with promises of adventure for the Brazier family. Frank had saved for months to provide his dear wife and daughters with something they had deserved for a long time, a vacation trip through the American Midwest. It was a time when traveling long distances was still a considerable adventure, especially for a family of modest means. The preparation for the trip was an event in itself. Elizabeth sewed new clothes for the girls. Frank checked and reviewed his Ford Model T several times, making sure the car would endure the long journey through the dusty roads of rural America. The children could barely contain their excitement, making elaborate plans about all the places they would visit. But the question that most concerned the family was what to do with Bobbie. Leaving him with neighbors seemed unthinkable. Bobbie had never been separated from the family for more than a few hours. His anxiety was visible whenever he sensed that someone was preparing to leave the house. How could they abandon him for entire weeks? The solution came naturally. Bobbie would travel with them. After all, he was part of the family, wasn't he? Frank adapted the car, creating a comfortable space in the back seat where Bobbie could travel along with the girls. The dog seemed to understand that something special was happening, his excitement mirroring that of the family. The journey began on a sunny August morning. Bobbie was radiant, his head frequently sticking out the window, ears in the wind, eyes shining with the curiosity of one discovering a new world. He was the perfect travel companion, calm when necessary, animated when appropriate, always in tune with the family's mood. Days passed on dusty roads, through landscapes that gradually changed from Oregon's lush green to the golden plains of the Midwest. Bobbie adapted to the travel routine as if he had been born for it. At rest stops, he explored the surroundings, always close to the family, never wandering too far, as if he intuitively understood that they were far from home. home. Nights were spent in small inns or improvised camps. Bobbie always slept near the car, a silent guardian watching over his family's sleep. During these starry nights, Frank sometimes looked at the dog and felt a deep gratitude for having such a loyal companion. It was in Wolcott, Indiana, a small town that would be forever marked in the Brazier family's history, that the unthinkable happened. It was a hot August day, and the family had stopped at a gas station to fuel the car and stretch their legs. Bobbie, as always, got out of the car with everyone, taking the opportunity to explore the surroundings. That's when they appeared. A group of local dogs, perhaps feeling territorial about the stranger's presence, began to surround Bobbie aggressively. What started as silent tension quickly escalated into a fierce fight. Bobbie, despite his gentle nature, had to defend himself. In the midst of the confusion, screams, barking and dust, Bobbie disappeared. When the fight was broken up by the station employees and some passers-by, the Brazier family looked around in panic. Bobbie had vanished. There was no sign of him anywhere. What should have been just a routine stop had become the beginning of a nightmare. Frank shouted Bobbie's name until he was hoarse. The girls began to cry. Elizabeth felt as if a part of her heart had been torn out. They searched every alley, every corner of the small town, but Bobbie had disappeared as if the earth had swallowed him. The dream trip had become the Brazier family's worst nightmare. The despair that took hold of the Brazier family in those first moments after Bobbie's disappearance is something that only those who have lost a beloved family member can truly understand. Frank, a practical and determined man, refused to accept that Bobbie had simply disappeared. There was hope, and as long as there was hope, they would continue searching. The first reaction was to systematically cover every street, every alley, every field in the Wolcott area. Frank drove slowly through the streets while Elizabeth and the girls walked, calling Bobbie's name with a mixture of hope and despair that echoed through the quiet houses of the small Midwest town. The local residents, touched by the family's visible anguish, joined the search. It was moving to see strangers dedicating their time and energy to help a family they didn't even know find their lost dog. Search groups were formed spontaneously, each exploring a different direction, expanding the search radius. Frank spent his vacation savings printing hundreds of flyers with Bobbie's photo and information about his disappearance. The photo showed Bobbie in his yard in Silverton, his cheerful and confident expression contrasting painfully with the present reality. The flyers were distributed in every commercial establishment, nailed to telegraph poles, handed out from hand to hand. Elizabeth wrote detailed ads that were published in Wolcott's local newspaper and in neighboring towns' newspapers. Her description of Bobbie was touching in its loving precision. Mixed collie, white and brown coat, intelligent and caring eyes, answers to the name Bobbie. He's more than a pet. He's a beloved member of our family. Please, if you see him, contact us. Days dragged like eternity. Each morning brought new hope that this would be the day they would find Bobbie. Each phone call made the family's heart race. Would it be someone with news? Each knock at the door of the inn where they were staying could be the answer to their prayers. But the leads were false or led nowhere. A farmer had seen a dog that looked like Bobbie, but when the family rushed there, they discovered it was a local animal. A child reported seeing Bobbie near the train station, but when they investigated, they found no sign of him. Frank expanded the search to neighboring towns. They visited police stations, talked to veterinarians, checked shelters for abandoned animals. At every place they visited, they left flyers and earnestly asked that any sightings be reported immediately. The girls, initially hopeful, began to show signs of emotional stress. They constantly asked when they would find Bobbie, if he was okay, if he was hungry or afraid. Elizabeth did her best to console them, but how could she offer hope when she herself was losing hers? 2 weeks passed. The family's savings were running out, and Frank faced the cruel reality that he needed to make a decision. They couldn't stay in Indiana indefinitely. He had a business to take care of in Oregon, responsibilities that couldn't be ignored forever. The most difficult decision Frank had ever made was made on a rainy September morning. They would return to Oregon, but they wouldn't give up on Bobbie. They would leave contact information with everyone who had helped them, keep the ads in the newspapers, and continue waiting for news. The return trip to Silverton was the quietest and saddest the family had ever made. The seat that had once been occupied by Bobbie's cheerful presence was painfully empty. Every mile took them further from where Bobbie had disappeared, and this seemed like a betrayal to the loyal companion who had faithfully followed them there. When they finally arrived home, the house seemed strangely empty. Bobbie's toys were still in the yard, his food bowl in its usual place, his bed at the foot of Frank and Elizabeth's bed. Each object was a painful reminder of who was missing. Elizabeth couldn't bring herself to put away Bobbie's things. He'll come back, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. He'll find his way home. What happened to Bobbie after his disappearance in Wolcott, Indiana, is a story that defies human understanding and forces us to rethink what we know about determination, instinct, and unconditional love. Although we will never know exactly every detail of Bobbie's epic journey, subsequent evidence and witness accounts allowed researchers to reconstruct a probable route that is nothing short of miraculous. Imagine for a moment the confusion and terror that Bobbie must have felt in those first moments after the fight with the local dogs. Injured, Frightened, in completely unfamiliar territory, he found himself alone for the first time in his life. Most animals in this situation would succumb to panic or resignation, but Bobbie was different. Somewhere deep in his canine soul, an internal compass began to work. We don't know if it was instinct, olfactory memory, or something more mystical, but Bobbie made a decision that would change his life forever. He would go home. No matter the distance, no matter the obstacles, he would find the way back to his family. The route that Bobbie probably followed is impressive in its vastness. From Wolcott, Indiana to Silverton, Oregon is approximately 4,000 kilometers in a straight line. But Bobbie didn't travel in a straight line. Evidence suggests he followed a route that took him through Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and finally Oregon. Why this specific route? Animal behavior experts believe that Bobbie may have followed natural landmarks, rivers, mountain ranges, or even magnetic force lines of the earth that some animals can detect. It's possible he partially retraced the route the family had taken on the trip there, following familiar scents and visual landmarks engraved in his extraordinary memory. Bobbie's journey took him through some of the most challenging terrain in the United States. He crossed the frozen plains of Nebraska in winter, where temperatures can drop well below zero. He faced the Rocky Mountains of Wyoming, with their snow-capped peaks and treacherous valleys. He navigated through Idaho's dense forests, where predators like bears and mountain lions represented a constant threat. How did a domestic dog manage to survive these extreme conditions? The answer lies in the extraordinary combination of Collie genetics, unconscious training received during years of rural life, and a determination that seemed almost supernatural. Collies were originally bred to be shepherd dogs in the Scottish Highlands, developing over centuries characteristics that made them exceptionally adaptable and resilient. Their double coat offered protection against extreme cold, their paws were strong and adapted to rocky terrain, and their superior intelligence allowed them to solve complex problems of navigation and survival. To feed himself, Bobbie probably hunted small rodents, ate wild fruits when available, and occasionally was fed by kind farmers he met along the way. There are documented records of at least 3 farmers who later recognized Bobbie and confirmed having fed him during his journey. Thirst was quenched in streams and natural lakes, but there must have been moments of severe dehydration, especially during the crossing of more arid regions. Bobbie probably developed a keen ability to detect water sources at a distance, a skill that may have meant the difference between life and death. Weather conditions during Bobbie's journey were particularly brutal. He traveled during the fall and winter months, facing snowstorms, freezing winds, and temperatures that would have killed most domestic dogs. But something within Bobbie, perhaps the power of love, perhaps an inexplicable willpower, kept him moving. Imagine the lonely nights that Bobbie spent huddled under bridges or in abandoned barns, listening to the frightening sounds of the wild. Imagine the constant hunger, the physical exhaustion, the injured and bleeding paws. And yet each morning, he got up and continued walking westward, guided by an internal compass that invariably pointed toward home. There were moments when Bobbie must have hesitated, moments when the journey seemed impossible, but then perhaps a breeze would bring a familiar scent, or a landscape would awaken a distant memory of the outward journey, and he would find the strength to continue. What kept Bobbie moving during all those months wasn't just survival instinct, it was love. Love for Frank, for Elizabeth, for the girls, love for the warmth of home, for the security of familiar routine, for the comfort of belonging somewhere and to someone. To truly understand the magnitude of what Bobbie achieved, we need to delve into the science behind his extraordinary survival journey. What he accomplished defies not only our expectations about canine capability, but also our scientific understanding of animal navigation, physical endurance, and psychological determination. Dr. William Thornton, a renowned animal behavior specialist from the University of Oregon who extensively studied Bobbie's case, explained that the combination of factors that allowed this journey is almost unprecedented. We're talking about an extraordinary convergence between exceptional genetics, physical conditioning, superior intelligence, and above all, an emotional motivation that transcends what we normally observe in the animal kingdom. Collie genetics were fundamental to Bobbie's survival. This breed was developed over centuries in the Scottish Highlands and northern England, where shepherds needed dogs capable of working in extreme conditions. Collies developed a unique double coat, a dense insulating undercoat covered by water-repellent outer hair. This natural adaptation allowed Bobbie to survive temperatures that would have been fatal to less adapted breeds. More importantly, was the exceptional cardiovascular capacity of collies. Bred to run long distances over difficult terrain while herding flocks, they developed efficient hearts and circulatory systems that allowed them to maintain intense physical activity for prolonged periods. This cardiovascular endurance was crucial to Bobbie's journey of thousands of kilometers. But physical survival is only part of the equation. The most fascinating aspect of Bobbie's journey is his navigation ability. How did a dog manage to find his way through thousands of kilometers of unknown territory? The answer lies in a combination of sensory abilities that humans barely begin to understand. Dogs possess a sense of smell approximately 10,000 times more sensitive than ours. For Bobbie, The world was a three-dimensional map of scents, each breeze carrying information about terrain, weather, proximity to water, presence of other animals, and even general direction. Recent research suggests that some animals, including dogs, can detect Earth's magnetic fields. This internal compass may have guided Bobbie in the general westward direction, even when visual landmarks weren't available. During cloudy nights or snowstorms, when visual navigation was impossible, this magnetic capability may have been the difference between getting lost forever and continuing in the right direction. The exceptional intelligence of collies also played a crucial role. This breed is known for its ability to solve complex problems and adapt to new situations. Bobbie had to quickly learn how to hunt for food, identify safe water sources, find adequate shelter, and avoid predators, skills he had never needed to develop as a domestic dog. Evidence suggests that Bobbie developed a sophisticated travel pattern. He apparently traveled mainly during the cooler hours of the day, early morning and late afternoon, resting during midday heat and extreme nighttime cold. This strategy maximized his energy efficiency while minimizing exposure to dangerous conditions. To feed himself, Bobbie demonstrated remarkable adaptability. Reports from farmers along his route suggest he learned to hunt small rodents with surprising efficiency. His hunting technique probably evolved during the journey, becoming more refined and effective with experience. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in animal psychology, offers a fascinating perspective on the mental aspect of the journey. What we see in Bobbie is an extraordinary demonstration of what we call motivated cognition. His emotional connection to the family created a psychological force so powerful that it overcame basic self-preservation instincts that would normally lead an animal to seek safety in familiar territory. Similar historical cases, although rare, have been documented. In 1924, a year after Bobbie's journey, a German pointer named Nick traveled more than 3,000 kilometers across Australia to find his family. In 1979, a Siamese cat named Sugar found his family after a 2,500-kilometer journey across the United States. But none of these cases equal the combination of distance, adverse conditions, and detailed documentation of Bobbie's journey. He didn't just survive, he navigated with precision across a continent, demonstrating a combination of physical, mental, and emotional skills that continues to impress scientists almost a century later. What is perhaps most extraordinary is that Bobbie maintained his physical and mental condition throughout the journey. When he finally arrived home, although thin and tired, he still possessed the sweet and affectionate personality his family knew. The journey hadn't made him wild or aggressive. It had only reinforced his determination to reunite with those he loved. It was a cold February morning in 1924 when the impossible became reality. 6 months had passed since Bobbie had disappeared in Indiana. 6 months during which the Brazier family had oscillated between hope and despair, maintaining faith through sheer willpower and the love they felt for their lost companion. Elizabeth was preparing breakfast when she heard a sound that made her heart stop, a familiar scratching at the kitchen door. It was the same sound Bobbie made every morning when he wanted to come in to receive his morning affection. For a moment, she stood motionless, not daring to believe what her ears were detecting. Slowly, with trembling hands, she opened the kitchen door, and there, swaying from exhaustion but with eyes shining with joy and recognition, was Bobbie. But this wasn't the same Bobbie who had left with them for Indiana. This Bobbie was unrecognizable. He had lost more than 15 kilograms. His once luxuriant coat was dull and matted. His paws were raw from the thousands of kilometers traveled, and scars told stories of dangerous encounters and miraculous survival. Elizabeth let out a scream that echoed through the entire house. "Frank! Girls, Bobbie's back, Bobbie's home!" Frank ran from the living room, initially skeptical. How many times had they imagined hearing Bobbie? How many times had they thought they saw his familiar silhouette, only to discover it was another dog, or even shadows playing tricks on anxious hearts? But when he saw the dog in the kitchen doorway, there was no doubt. It was really Bobbie. The girls came running, their cries of joy mixing with tears of happiness. They threw themselves on the floor next to Bobbie, who could barely stand but whose tail wouldn't stop wagging. Even in his state of extreme exhaustion, he tried to lick every face, every hand, as if wanting to confirm that he wasn't dreaming, that he had really found his family. Frank, a man who rarely showed emotion, knelt on the floor and gently embraced his loyal companion. Tears ran freely down his face as he whispered, "Bobbie, my boy, you did it. You really managed to come home." But there was an urgent practical matter. Bobbie needed medical care immediately. Frank picked up the dog in his arms, something that had never been necessary with the healthy and strong Bobbie of the past, and ran to the local veterinarian, Dr. George Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton was astonished when examining Bobbie. "It's impossible," he murmured. while examining the injured paws and emaciated body. A domestic dog couldn't survive a journey of this magnitude, but there was the living evidence before him. The examination revealed the extent of what Bobbie had faced. His paws were cut and calloused, his paw pads almost completely worn away. He had lost considerable weight, but surprisingly showed no signs of severe malnutrition, suggesting he had managed to find food along the way. Several scars on his body told stories of encounters with other animals, possibly predators or hostile dogs. Even more remarkable was his mental condition. Despite the extraordinary journey and the adversities faced, Bobbie maintained his sweet and trusting personality. He hadn't become wild or aggressive. It was as if his determination to return to the family had preserved his essence, protecting his gentle soul through the most challenging journey imaginable. The first night back was emotional for the whole family. Bobbie ate slowly but with appetite, drank water in quantities that suggested prolonged thirst, and then instinctively headed to his familiar bed at the foot of Frank and Elizabeth's bed. But instead of sleeping immediately, he stayed awake for hours, as if he needed to continually confirm that he was really home. Elizabeth spent the night awake, occasionally reaching out to gently touch Bobbie's head, confirming to herself that this miracle was real. Frank, traditionally skeptical about dramatic stories, found himself struggling to process the magnitude of what had happened. In the days that followed, details of Bobbie's journey began to emerge. A Nebraska farmer contacted the family after seeing an article in the local newspaper about Bobbie's return. He recognized the description and confirmed having fed a collie, matching Bobbie's appearance during a snowstorm in December. A Wyoming train station employee reported seeing a similar dog resting on the platform for several nights in January, always departing at dawn heading west. Each account added a piece to the impossible puzzle of Bobbie's journey, confirming not only that the story was real, but that other kind humans along the way had, each in their own way, contributed to the miracle of his return. Bobbie's physical recovery was gradual but remarkable. Within a few weeks, he had regained weight, his coat began to shine again, and his paws healed completely. More impressive still, he quickly returned to his familiar routine, as if the epic journey had been just a temporary interlude in his domestic life. What had made this miraculous return possible? It was pure and simple love, the kind of unconditional love that transcends physical obstacles and defies rational explanations. Bobbie had proven that the heart, when truly dedicated, can overcome any distance. News of Bobbie's miraculous return spread through Little Silverton like wildfire. Within days, what began as a local story transformed into a national phenomenon that captured the imagination of all America. The first article was published in the Silverton Appeal, the local newspaper, under the headline, "Local Dog Completes Impossible 4,000-Kilometer Journey Home." Journalist Charles Alexander, initially skeptical, became one of the most ardent defenders of the story's veracity after extensively interviewing the Brazier family and examining the physical evidence. What made the story even more compelling was the perfect timing. The America of 1924 was going through a period of rapid change and uncertainty. World War I had ended, but its scars were still fresh. People yearned for stories that would restore their faith in loyalty, love, and the possibility of miracles in a world that often seemed cruel and unpredictable. The Associated Press picked up the story and distributed it nationally. Within weeks, newspapers from New York to Los Angeles were publishing articles about Bobbie the Wonder Dog. The New York Times dedicated a front-page article to the story, calling it one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of animal loyalty ever documented. Hollywood also paid attention. Film producers began making offers for the rights to Bobbie's story. The Brazier family, still processing the miracle of having their companion back, suddenly found themselves at the center of national attention they had never imagined. But it was National Geographic magazine that gave Bobbie's story its definitive scientific legitimacy. Dr. Edmund Heller, a renowned zoologist, was sent to personally investigate the story. His detailed report, published in the October 1924 edition, concluded, after thorough investigation, including interviews with multiple witnesses and analysis of physical evidence, I can confirm that this dog really completed a journey of approximately 4,000 kilometers through hostile terrain to return to his family. Scientific confirmation transformed Bobbie from a local curiosity into a legitimate national celebrity. Invitations began arriving from all over the country. Humane organizations wanted Bobbie to participate in their events. Theaters offered special showings where Bobbie would appear in person, and even the Ringling Brothers Circus expressed interest in including him in their performances. Frank Brazier, a simple man who valued privacy, found himself in a dilemma. On one hand, he wanted to protect Bobbie from the stress of fame. On the other, he recognized that his dog's story was inspiring people throughout the country, offering hope in a time when hope was a rare commodity. The solution came in the form of carefully selected appearances. Bobbie would make some public presentations, but only at events that honored his story without exploiting his fame. The first major appearance was at the 1924 Oregon State Fair, where thousands of people lined up to see the Wonder Dog in person. What impressed people who met Bobbie personally was how he remained unchanged by fame. He was still the same gentle and affectionate dog as always, perhaps a little wiser, certainly more resilient, but fundamentally the same loyal companion who had left on that fateful trip to Indiana. The American Humane Association awarded Bobbie its first gold medal ever granted to an animal, recognizing not only his extraordinary journey, but also what it represented about the special bond between humans and animals. The award was presented at a ceremony in Portland, attended by Oregon's governor and hundreds of dignitaries. Letters arrived daily at the Brazier family from people across the country, sharing their own stories of animal loyalty, expressing gratitude for the hope that Bobbie's story had brought to their lives. One particularly touching letter came from an elderly widow in Boston. Bobbie's story reminded me that true love always finds a way back home. Thank you for sharing your miracle with us. Companies began using Bobbie's image in their advertising campaigns, always with the Brazier family's careful permission. A dog food company created a special Bobbie brand line, with all profits being donated to local animal shelters. The cultural impact of Bobbie's story was profound and lasting. It changed the way many Americans viewed their pets, elevating them from property status to that of true family members. Animal protection organizations reported a significant increase in adoptions and a reduction in animal abandonment in the months following the story's publication. More significantly, Bobbie's story came at a time when America was rapidly urbanizing. Many people were moving away from their rural roots and the intimate connection with animals that had characterized American life for generations. Bobbie's story served as a powerful reminder of this special connection and its importance to the human spirit. Universities began studying Bobbie's case as part of broader research into animal behavior and navigation capabilities. His story contributed to important advances in scientific understanding of how animals navigate across long distances. Bobbie's recognition transcended national boundaries. Newspapers in England, France, and even Japan published articles about his journey. The story became a universal symbol of loyalty and love that exist between different species, but perhaps the most significant recognition came from children. Schools across the country began teaching Bobbie's story as an example of determination and loyalty. Children wrote essays about what they learned from Bobbie, drew portraits of his epic journey, and many expressed the desire to have a companion as loyal as him. Bobbie's fame also brought responsibility. The Brazier family became involuntary advocates for animal rights, using the platform that Bobbie's story had created to promote humane and responsible treatment of all animals. In an era when extraordinary stories were often met with justifiable skepticism, the meticulous documentation of Bobbie's journey became crucial to establishing his credibility. What differentiated Bobbie's story from similar folktales was the wealth of physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and contemporary documentation that supported every aspect of his impossible journey. The verification process began with Bobbie himself. Dr. George Hamilton, the veterinarian who examined Bobbie upon arrival, meticulously documented his physical condition. His detailed notes, preserved in the Oregon Historical Society archives, include photographs of Bobbie's injured paws, weight loss measurements, and descriptions of scars that told the story of his journey. Even more convincing was the specific condition of Bobbie's paw pads. Dr. Hamilton noted a wear pattern consistent with prolonged walking on varied terrain. The pads were completely worn in some areas, calloused in others, and showed signs of recent healing where they had been cut by stones or ice. This wear pattern would be impossible to fabricate and corresponded exactly to what would be expected from a dog that had walked thousands of kilometers. The Oregon Journal sent its most experienced journalist, Vincent Sheehan, to independently investigate the story. Sheehan spent 3 weeks retracing Bobbie's probable route, visiting communities along the way and looking for witnesses. His report, published in several parts during March 1924, confirmed multiple sightings of a dog matching Bobbie's description. In Wolcott, Indiana, Sheehan found the gas station employees who had witnessed Bobbie's original disappearance. Their descriptions of the incident, recorded independently and months later, remained consistent in all important details. The station manager, Thomas Crawford, still had a copy of the original flyer the Brazier family had left. Even more impressive were the witnesses along the route. In Des Moines, Iowa, a farmer named Henry Mueller immediately recognized Bobbie's photograph published in the newspaper. He contacted journalists to report that he had fed an injured collie during a snowstorm in November 1923. His description of the dog, including specific details about a scar on the left ear that perfectly matched a mark Bobbie had since puppyhood, was confirmed as accurate. Sarah Jenkins, owner of a small inn in North Platte, Nebraska, reported allowing a hungry and exhausted collie to sleep in her stable for 3 nights in December. She described how the dog, despite his deplorable deplorable condition, showed signs of domestic training, didn't enter the house without permission, waited politely for food, and showed a gentleness that suggested upbringing in a loving family. Perhaps the most convincing evidence came from a traveling photographer named James Morrison. In January 1924, Morrison was documenting rural life in Wyoming when he captured an extraordinary image: a solitary collie walking through a snowy landscape, clearly traveling with defined purpose. When the photo was published, along with articles about Bobbie, multiple people confirmed that the dog in the photo was indistinguishable from Bobbie. Oregon State University commissioned a scientific study of Bobbie's journey, led by Dr. William Thompson from the zoology department. Thompson and his team mapped the most probable route using witness accounts, recorded weather conditions, and knowledge about animal behavior. Their report, published in 1925, concluded that not only was the journey physically possible, but the route documented through testimonies logically corresponded to known animal navigation patterns. The Humane Society of the United States sent investigators to independently verify the story. Their investigation, conducted by professional detectives experienced in fraud cases, found no evidence of staging or exaggeration. The official report stated, after thorough investigation, including interviews with dozens of witnesses and analysis of physical evidence, we found no reason to doubt the veracity of this extraordinary story. Newspaper records from the time provide a detailed chronology that supports the story. The Wolcott Herald documented Bobbie's original disappearance in August 1923. Newspapers along the route reported sightings during the following months. The Silverton Appeal documented his return in February 1924. The temporal and geographical consistency of these contemporary reports offers compelling evidence that would be extremely difficult to fabricate. Photographs of Bobbie before and after the journey provide striking visual evidence. The before photos show a robust and well-cared-for collie with lustrous coat. The after photos show the same dog, identifiable by distinctive markings, but dramatically transformed by the journey. Thinner, with dull coat, but with the same intelligent eyes and gentle expression. Personal letters and documents from the Brazier family, donated to the Oregon Historical Society, provide insight into their thoughts and emotions during the crisis. These letters, never intended for publication, show the genuine anguish of the family during the search for Bobbie and their authentic joy at his return. The most sophisticated scientific verification came decades later, when modern technology allowed more detailed analysis of the evidence. In 1974, on the 50th anniversary of Bobbie's journey, Oregon State University researchers used advanced meteorological techniques to reconstruct weather conditions during the period of the journey. Their findings confirmed that the conditions reported by witnesses were consistent with official meteorological records. Modern forensic analysis of Bobbie's photographs, using pattern identification techniques developed for criminal cases, confirmed that the dog in the before and after photos was definitely the same animal. Distinctive markings, body proportions, and unique facial characteristics were all matched with scientific precision. Perhaps the most powerful evidence is the absence of contradictions or inconsistencies in the story. Decades of investigation by skeptical journalists, rigorous scientists, and professional investigators failed to find any evidence of fraud or exaggeration. The story remains, in all essential details, exactly as it was originally reported. The documentation of Bobbie's journey establishes a standard for verification that few historical events can match. The convergence of physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, contemporary documentation, and scientific analysis creates a convincingly strong case that this extraordinary journey really happened exactly as described. Bobbie's legacy extends far beyond his extraordinary journey, touching fundamental aspects of how American society came to understand and value the relationship between humans and animals. His story became a cultural watershed that influenced generations of thinking about loyalty, family, and what it means to belong to something greater than ourselves. In the years immediately following Bobbie's return, there was a perceptible shift in animal protection laws throughout the country. Before 1924, domestic animals were largely considered property, with few legal rights or protections. Bobbie's story humanized animals in the eyes of the American public in a way that rational arguments alone could not achieve. The state of Oregon was the first to pass what became known as Bobbie's Law, legislation that established stronger protections against animal cruelty and formally recognized the special status of domestic animals as family members. Other states quickly followed suit, creating a wave of legal reform that transformed the juridical landscape for animals throughout America. Animal shelters reported dramatic changes in adoption patterns. Before Bobbie's story, many people viewed pets as replaceable. If a dog got lost or died, they would simply get another one. Bobbie's journey demonstrated the unique individuality of each animal and the depth of possible emotional connections, leading people to invest more time and energy in finding lost animals and taking better care of the ones they had. The veterinary industry was also transformed. Dr. Hamilton, the veterinarian who treated Bobbie, reported a substantial increase in demand for preventive veterinary care in the years following Bobbie's story. People began to see medical care for animals not as luxury, but as moral responsibility toward genuine family members. Educators quickly recognized the power of Bobbie's story as a pedagogical tool. Schools across the country began incorporating his journey into curricula, using it to teach geography, following his route through the states, science, studying animal navigation and survival, and moral values, exploring themes of loyalty, perseverance, and unconditional love. The impact on children's literature was particularly profound. Bobbie's story inspired an entire generation of authors to write stories about animals that treated their subjects as complex and emotionally rich protagonists rather than simple supporting characters. This shift in juvenile literature helped shape generations of children to see animals as sentient beings worthy of respect and consideration. Hollywood recognized Bobbie's cultural power, producing multiple films based on his story. The first, The Call of the West, 1925, was one of the first films to feature an animal as the main protagonist. Although the films took artistic liberties with the facts, they expanded the reach of Bobbie's story to audiences who might not have read journalistic accounts. Bobbie's influence on popular culture extended beyond films. Songs were written about his journey, theatrical plays were performed, and visual artists created works inspired by his story. In 1926, the famous artist Georgia O'Keeffe painted Journey Home, an abstract representation of Bobbie's journey that captured both the physical landscape he traversed and the emotional landscape of his determination. Scientific researchers found in Bobbie's story a valuable case study for understanding animal behavior and navigation abilities. Universities established research programs dedicated to studying how animals navigate long distances, leading to breakthroughs in understanding magnetic sensitivity, olfactory navigation, and cognitive mapping in various species. Bobbie's legacy also manifests in practical changes in how people deal with lost animals. Before his story, many families would give up looking for a lost animal after a few days. Bobbie's journey demonstrated that animals can travel unimaginable distances to return home, leading to changes in search protocols and the establishment of national networks to help reunite lost pets with their families. The city of Silverton fully embraced the legacy of its most famous resident. In 1927, 3 years after his return, a bronze statue of Bobbie was unveiled in the city center. The statue, created by renowned sculptor Alexander Calder, shows Bobbie in an alert and determined pose, looking toward the west as if still contemplating his journey home. More significantly, Silverton established the Bobbie Foundation, an organization dedicated to reuniting lost pets with their families and promoting responsible pet ownership. The foundation, which continues operating today, has helped thousands of animals find their way home and educated countless people about the importance of proper identification and care for pets. Bobbie's international influence was also substantial. His story was translated into dozens of languages and became a global symbol of loyalty and love. In countries around the world, Bobbie dogs became a colloquial term for animals that demonstrate extraordinary loyalty or determination. Perhaps most importantly, Bobbie's story changed how many people think about what constitutes family. His journey demonstrated that love and loyalty transcend species boundaries, that connections between humans and animals can be every bit as profound and meaningful as those between humans themselves. This shift in perception had practical ramifications. Pet insurance, veterinary specialization, animal behaviorism as an academic discipline, and countless other innovations in animal care can trace their origins back to changes in attitude that Bobbie's story helped precipitate. In 1974, on the 50th anniversary of Bobbie's journey, the state of Oregon declared February 15th, the anniversary of his return home, as Pet Loyalty Day, a holiday designed to honor the special bonds between humans and their animal companions. The tradition spread to other states and continues today as an annual celebration of the type of unconditional love that Bobbie exemplified. Bobbie's legacy also lives on in countless individual families who were inspired by his story to treat their pets as genuine family members, to never give up hope when a pet goes missing, and to appreciate the extraordinary capacity for love and loyalty that animals possess. As we come to the end of Bobbie's extraordinary story, we are compelled to reflect on the profound and enduring lessons that his impossible journey continues to teach us nearly a century after his epic walk home. Bobbie's story is, at its essence, a meditation on the nature of unconditional love. In a world often characterized by conditional relationships where loyalty is based on convenience or personal interest, Bobbie demonstrated a form of love that is rare even among humans, a love so pure and selfless that he was willing to sacrifice everything, including his own safety and comfort, to reunite with those he loved. Consider for a moment the magnitude of what Bobbie truly achieved. He didn't simply survive a dangerous journey, he maintained faith when all rational evidence suggested he should give up. When faced with seemingly insurmountable mountains, frozen rivers, snowstorms that would have defeated most living beings, Bobbie chose to continue. His determination wasn't based on logic or calculation, but on something much more fundamental, a love so deep that it transcended all physical barriers. This extraordinary determination forces us to question our own definitions of courage and perseverance. How many times do we, as humans supposedly superior in intellect and resources, give up in the face of obstacles much smaller than those Bobbie faced? His story serves as a mirror in which we can examine our own capacity for commitment and dedication to those and to what truly matter in our lives. Bobbie's journey also offers us profound insights into the nature of family and belonging. His inexorable drive to return home wasn't motivated by territory or primitive instinct, but by emotional connections he had formed with specific individuals. He wasn't simply returning to a place, he was returning to people who had become an integral part of his identity and purpose. This distinction is crucial because it highlights something that modern society often forgets, that true home isn't defined by location or possessions, but by the relationships that give meaning to our lives. Bobbie understood instinctively what many humans struggle to comprehend, that belonging is created through mutual love, trust, and commitment, not through geographic proximity or economic arrangements. Bobbie's story also challenges our assumptions about intelligence and consciousness. His ability to navigate thousands of miles through unfamiliar territory, to make survival decisions under extreme stress, to maintain hope through months of hardship, demonstrates a type of intelligence that is different from human cognition, but no less remarkable. Perhaps most importantly, Bobbie's journey illustrates the power of hope, both the hope he maintained during his journey and the hope his story has provided to countless others. In a time when cynicism and despair can easily overwhelm us, Bobbie's story serves as a powerful reminder that miraculous things can happen when we refuse to give up on those we love. The implications of this lesson extend far beyond our relationships with animals. Bobbie's story encourages us to approach all our relationships with family members, friends, communities with the same type of unconditional commitment he demonstrated. Imagine how different our world would be if humans showed the same unwavering loyalty to each other that Bobbie showed to his family. Bobbie's story also speaks to our relationship with nature and the natural world. His survival depended not only on his own capabilities, but also on acts of kindness from humans along his route. Farmers who provided food, strangers who offered shelter, people who recognized a fellow sentient being in need and responded with compassion. This symbiosis between Bobbie and the human communities that helped him demonstrates that we are all interconnected in ways we often forget. In our modern world, where technology has made distances seem smaller, but has paradoxically made genuine connection feel more elusive, Bobbie's story reminds us that true bonds transcend physical separation. His journey proves that love creates its own form of navigation, that emotional connections can guide us home even when we're lost in ways that GPS and satellite communication cannot. Bobbie's legacy continues to inspire new generations because his story addresses fundamental questions that every human faces. How do we define loyalty? What are we willing to sacrifice for those we love? How do we maintain hope when faced with seemingly impossible circumstances? His answers to these questions, expressed through action rather than words, continue to resonate because they speak to universal human experiences. Perhaps most profoundly, Bobbie's story reminds us that we share this planet with other sentient beings who are capable of emotions and connections every bit as deep and meaningful as our own. His journey challenges us to expand our definition of family, to recognize that love and loyalty are not exclusively human traits, and to treat all living creatures with the respect and compassion they deserve. As we face challenges in our own lives, moments when the path home seems impossibly long or difficult, when we're separated from those we love, when hope seems foolish in the face of overwhelming odds, we can draw inspiration from Bobbie's extraordinary example. His journey reminds us that love creates its own miracles, that determination can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable, and that sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be. Bobbie's story is ultimately a celebration of the capacity for love that exists in all living beings, and a reminder that this love, when genuine and unconditional, has the power to achieve the impossible. In a world that often seems divided by differences, Bobbie's legacy unites us in our shared capacity for devotion, sacrifice, and hope. His paw prints, worn into stone and memory during his legendary journey home, continue to light the way for all of us who are still finding our own paths back to what matters most. And in that guidance, in that example of pure love transcending every obstacle, we find not just a remarkable story, but a blueprint for living lives of meaning, purpose, and unshakable faith in the power of love to carry us home. Bobbie's story ends where it started, with a family reunited, with love triumphant, with tangible proof that miracles still happen for those who never stop believing. And in that ending, which is really a beginning, we discover that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys are not measured in miles traveled, but in hearts touched, lives changed, and spirits lifted by the enduring power of one small dog's impossible love.